Last we were talking, Dad, the war was finishing in 45. You were kept behind for a year because during your time with the military government, you had been responsible and very knowledgeable on military law, which is why they kept you there. So you had gone into the military as a journalist major, and now you were returning home to Columbia with extensive experience in military government and military law. And coming back to Columbia, you are now interested in pursuing law, and re-entered and graduated you graduated from college in 47, and you graduated from law school, which takes 3 years, but you graduated the very next year in 48. How did you do that?
Well, it was a combination of things. I always, after I volunteered, I always dreamt of coming back and making up the time, somehow getting to graduate with my class from Columbia College. I didn't quite do it, but a lot of my college friends when I graduated were the same ones I had at Columbia when I was going there. At any rate, Columbia gave some benefits to veterans. For example, your last year of college, you could use as your first year of your graduate school. So I used my last year of college as the first year of law school. Also, I took 21 points. First year I came back, which was much more than most people. I had to get permission from the dean. But at the end of the day, I ended up graduating from Columbia Law School 1 year after I graduated from Columbia College. And here in the next room are the diplomas to demonstrate that. Getting out of the military was an odd experience. Just like going in, taking off your civilian clothes and putting on your military uniform felt very awkward for a while. And now coming home, I was surprised how uncomfortable it was to get back into civilian clothes and get out of those military clothes. And we weren't staring at each other in our civilian clothes. Anyway, after Columbia Law School, I was looking for a job. I graduated, I passed the bar. The trouble was that so did the current year law school graduates, and all the law school graduates who had, like me, gone off the war and now coming back to finish school. So there was a big lump in the number of young lawyers on Wall Street that year. And so it was difficult, but I had decided I would go into practice of law on Wall Street. It was so close to where I had been working and living. And I looked around for a job, and because of the sheer number of people looking for law jobs, I was surprised. It was difficult. I went to one very large law firm. It was called Haight Gardner Poor Havens. It was the largest admiralty or maritime law firm in the world. But I didn't know that. I just went there because there were several lawyers who had graduated from Columbia Law School. And my plan for getting a job was always to get in touch with a graduate from Columbia who's now established, ask him for a job. You'd have an advantage over asking a total stranger. And this particular visit was really mind-boggling. I went into the law firm and I interviewed with a Columbia graduate who's now a partner in the firm. And he's telling me about how things went and whatnot. And he said that they didn't have enough work to hire more people because admiralty law, maritime law, is a specialty. There's only two specialties in the law. One is admiralty law, and the other is patents. People who take care of inventions and patents. Nobody else can put on their business card that they're a specialist. So this particular firm specialized in admiralty law, and they had about 140, 150 lawyers, which for Wall Street was not a big firm. It was a big firm for me. Anyway, I went in, I was being interviewed. The guy was very kind, but he was trying to tell me, forget it, we don't have any work in this firm. And the guy walked by, and the lawyer I was being interviewed by jumped up and called after this guy, Colonel, an Army colonel in the law firm. He turned around and came back. Turns out he was the head of the firm. The firm was called Haight Gardner, Poor and Havens. And here was Mr. Gardner, who had fought in the Mexican War. And I was introduced to him, and nonchalantly the lawyer who was interviewing me mentioned that I was born in Italy and I spoke Italian. And the colonel jumped to about a foot. He says, "You speak Italian?" I said, "Yes." "And you could read Italian?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Stay right there." He goes running to his office. He comes back. And he says, "It just happens that today we received 600 cases involving lost cargo in the trying to help Europe after the war. They'd fill the ships with cargo because people were starving. And the ships would get to Europe, and almost always there were shortages. They shipped 100 cases, they only got 50. And Naples, Italy, the losses were especially large, and people would kind of laugh about it because Neapolitans had a reputation for stealing. In fact, this firm had sent 3 of the lawyers to Italy before I got there. They were still there to investigate specifically who was stealing the cargo at Naples, because the losses were so consistent. And but this firm's problem, the colonel's problem, was that he had 600 boxes filled with documents, each one represented one voyage of a ship. And in that box were all the documents, like the logbook and the different bills of lading, the receipts, dock receipts. The trouble was, in the shipments to Italy, all the documents relating to the losses were in Italian. And he had, as I said, he had 600 cases, and about 90% referred to Naples. So he hired me right away, not because I was such a smart lawyer, but only because I could read these documents. And they sent me down to the basement of 80 Broad Street, down in the Wall Street area, where I spent the next 6 months or so with another young recruit and the rats that once in a while ran around down in the basement. And these 600 cases to try to figure out what happened. It was by luck that one day I was looking at the records of a particular shipment. It was to Naples. And I noticed on the bills of lading, that's the contract that covers the carriage of the goods, as a complete description, that the bills of lading of the second box seem to have the same file numbers of the first box. It's impossible. Each shipment has assigned to it different file numbers that are stamped on every box, and so on. So I began to study that. Then by luck more than anything, I discovered that what was happening all along was not that the Neapolitans were stealing the cargo, but that when they loaded a Victory ship or a Liberty ship in New York to put the supplies for food, medicine, and so on, to help the people we were fighting just a year before. And here we are carrying tons of food to France, to Italy. And Italy had been our enemy, but was treated no different from France. So what I found out was they loaded every ship to the very top of the hatches, because they wanted to get as much as possible. But the result was that a particular shipment of 150 cases of food, they'd get, let's say, they'd get 100 on board, stuffing the cargo in, and then the next 50 cases that were left out, they would be carried on the next ship. But the mistake that was made was that when they carried the next 50 boxes, they issued another bill of lading, another contract of carriage. The first one for 150, and the second one for 50. And of course, there was a claim they were 50 short. And we had 600, but down on Wall Street, there must have been another 3,000 or 4,000 cases, different maritime law firms.
So the ship owners were responsible to the government for the delivery of these items, and they were under threat of being sued for having lost the cargoes. Yeah. And this was a tremendous amount of money because so many cargoes were claimed to be lost.
Right. And the
I remember the colonel, when you reported this to him, told you to be quiet.
yeah, because we had a lot of competitors on Wall Street, other law firms doing the same work, but for different shipping companies. They all had the same problem, not just with Italy, but other places in Europe. So, and in fact, like the three guys who went to Europe for our firm came back saying they couldn't figure it out. They came back with no solution. And so did some of the other firms. And the solution was so simple that the cargo that was left out, not loaded, on one ship, the word was shut out. It was shut, 50 cases were shut out. 100 cases went forward. And then the next shipment should have said, same bill of lading of 150 cases should have been issued with the note on it that these are the 50 cases that did not go forward on the first shipment. Well, the other firms, there were at least a dozen settling cases, were settling 75%. When you consider the amount of cargo involved, that was a lot of money. And when we discovered what had really happened, and there was no shortage, we settled our cases 15 to 20%. We were asked not to say anything to anybody.
The colonel's intention was to let the other shippers pay a tremendous amount of money for the suspected losses and then realize your firm understood what had happened and were smart enough to figure this out. You were the last ones to be represented, and the other shippers decided, this firm, we should be with them.
Well, the other firms had settled their claims. Most of them had settled their claims before we discovered this business of the double shipping. So it was too late for them to do anything. And 75% for an unexplained loss is not a bad settlement. But especially Colonel Gardner said, don't say this to any of the other firms who were handling cases like this on Wall Street. And we came out smelling like a rose, you know. Did you hear Haight Gardner settled for 15% and you settled for 75%? So I became like an overnight hero, although I was very young.
But I understand you went from the basement to having a window in an office and a very rapid career to partnership.
The what?
You had a very quick ascent to partnership.
Well, in this firm, Haight Gardner Purin Havens, a large part never became partners at all. About 10% made it. At the time I joined, they had about 25, 30 partners. And all the rest were young lawyers with good records from good law firms, good law schools. And those lawyers knew that they were going to get fired sooner or later, but they could go back to Idaho and say that they worked for a Wall Street firm. That was a big advantage in getting a job in Idaho. So to this day, law firms are hiring many more lawyers, young lawyers, than they intend to keep. But if you do it at a place like Wall Street, it's not bad at all. You see, the firms would let you resign rather than firing you. So anyway, I came out smelling like a rose and made life a lot easier.